Australians are creating more data than never before, but have you ever wondered where it all goes? It's been stored in highly secured centres like this one. Before we can get in, there is an ID check and they take your fingerprints. Inside this vault, a hotel for computers.
These racks are essentially where our customers house their computing infrastructure.
And how do you make sure these racks are up and running 24/7?
We have our power available 100% of the time.
Which is crucial for the services we've come to rely on.
Whether it's our healthcare, banking services, government services, there's no industry that isn't reliant on data today.
Just one large data center can consume the same amount of energy required to power 50,000 homes. Morgan Stanley estimates in total, data centers are currently chewing up 5% of Australia's power grid. And that's expected to grow to 8% by 2030, which some say could be underestimated.
I've seen numbers that suggest by 2030 data centres could be anywhere between 5 and 15% of our electricity demand.
Australia is one of the top 5 data centre hubs in the world. Across the country, there are 214 centres like this one. And with explosion of cloud computing and artificial intelligence, the industry is expected to grow exponentially.
We believe that we are at the beginning of a massive shift with AI. We truly believe that we're at the beginning of a change in accelerated compute that could see demand skyrocket over the next decade.
As the nation races to electrify, with households dumping gas appliances and more people driving electric vehicles, the grid is already under pressure.
I think Australia is not terribly well placed to cope with that increasing demand. We are now hitting the difficult stages of the energy transition. We've got wind and sun and land, but we don't have other clean energy, biomass, or decent amounts of hydro or nuclear.
The director of the Victoria Energy Policy Centre, Bruce Mountain, thinks the data centre boom will make the energy transition more challenging.
Because not just do you need to replace coal-fired generation, you need to build new capacity to meet rising demand.
If you add a lot more demand and you don't add more supply, then prices go up.
Energy retailer and generator Origin supplies power to about a third of all data centres in Australia. The man in charge of these accounts says the company is looking at a range of options to meet their needs.
And typically we would look at solutions like distributed generation, so wind or solar at site, storage solutions and backup generation. And our customers with their forecasts would vary somewhat, but typically those growth forecasts could be between about 10 and 30% per year.
To meet those energy demands, companies could be strategic about where they build data centres.
And one of the interesting features of this data center growth is that some of the locations could be more regional, and that can match some of the new renewable generation.
Carrying the load as challenges grow on Australia's energy grid.
When we think of emissions-heavy industries, AI or tech rarely comes to mind. But the boom in energy-intensive data centres comes with big carbon risks. I spoke with Gordon Noble, Director of Research at the UTS Institute for Sustainable Futures. Gordon Noble, welcome to The Business.
Thank you for having me, Alicia.
Gordon, what worries you most about Australia's rush to build and operate data centres?
Look, I think the issue that we've got really is that data centres are just flying under the radar, that there's not an appreciation of how big an issue it is. And I think it's time, particularly with the investment that we're seeing in artificial intelligence applications, that we started to understand that this is one of the big energy consumers in Australia. And just to give you some quick numbers, roughly data centres consume around 1 to 1.5% of all energy globally. That's the figure. and the aviation sector consumes around 2%, so it gives you an idea of the comparison. But what we're seeing is this massive investment in data centres, a lot of it fueled with AI applications. And there's estimates that right now it's around about 5% of all of our energy use here in Australia. But the issue is that this could explode, so this could even double. And I think the issue is we're not considering AI and data centres in the same way that we consider other energy-intensive industries.
In the US, Microsoft's total carbon emissions have risen by almost 30% since 2020, and that's according to the company's own annual environmental sustainability report. Data centres have been a big contributor to that.
Yeah, that's right. And we're seeing it's not just Microsoft, we're seeing it with all the big tech companies, Google with Meta, Amazon as well with their operations. They're all investing in different ways. They're building these AI machine learning tools, and as they're doing that, what we're starting to see is the disclosures that they're making. And as they're making disclosures to the market, we're actually seeing for the first time how big the actual increase in energy consumption and emissions are. So, as you say, we've got data from Microsoft, but Google's emissions increased by 50% over a 4-year period, and you've got spikes in all of them because they're all trying to do, if you like, own that market in terms of being dominant in AI, and it all requires basically data centres at the back of it.
So who becomes responsible for the emissions? The data centre operators or their clients, or is it both?
Yeah, and look, this is one of the issues that we looked at. So we've done two pieces of research, and it's been supported by Pure Storage, which are a technology company in this space. And we asked, the first survey we did last year, we asked sustainability professionals what they were seeing around data centres and the issues. And then this year we asked IT managers, and we asked them what their concerns were. And this is one of the issues we've got, is that there's a lack of talking between all of these different groups. In terms of who's responsible, I think what we need to see is that we're moving beyond it just being it's the responsibility of the individual data center operator. So it's the Amazon, the Google, the Microsoft, and even the businesses that will be using basically the applications that come out of data centers. They've all got responsibility. But now I think we've also got a responsibility because of the implications of this massive investment that we're seeing on the energy grid. We're starting to see that there's a responsibility here for government to come in and start to have a role in actually understanding how big this problem is.
Well, in Australia, according to Moody's, it's behind just China and India in terms of our region in the rush to build data centres. And here they need to obtain at least a 5-star rating from the National Built Environment Rating System. Is that enough to address sustainability issues?
No, I think this is where we're shifting. So we would expect every data centre has a green rating. That's just business as usual. They shouldn't be in the market if they don't have a green rating around their business. And we should be seeing investments around, for instance, renewable energy, energy efficiency, water, etc. And we should be having some good protocols around reporting of that. But the system issue is when you get a cumulative investment in data centres, and what we're seeing right now is that data centres are becoming an asset class for infrastructure funds and superannuation funds. So the amount of cumulative investment that we're seeing, that's raising a different set of issues. So we start to need to look at it not just in terms of individual data centres and how they operate, but also we need to see basically the big picture. What does it mean collectively?
So as AI fuels growth in data centres, is there a risk that corporates won't meet their net zero targets?
Yeah, look, it is, and we're seeing this with big tech already. There's as you're seeing the big companies disclose their emissions as a result of their investments in data centres, they're disclosing that this is going to be an issue in terms of meeting their own targets. In the US, for instance, there's a conversation already that some of the utilities that basically provide the electricity for the data centres to operate are deferring some of their decisions around what they might be basically taking coal-fired power stations offline because of the spike in energy demand that we're seeing from data centres. So we've got a series of implications, but yes, data centres are going to struggle to individually be able to match the increased demand in terms of renewable energy and that kind of side. But collectively, as I said, there's a big picture here we need to look at too.
And what's the risk that companies in the data centre space just rely on carbon credits to reach their net zero emissions targets?
Yeah, look, and I think we are seeing some evidence of that, and there's been some discussions of that overseas. The challenge with carbon credits is the market's not mature. We've still got some governance issues, and the conversation is whether it is better to make the investments into, for instance, supporting renewable energy, supporting water efficiency, energy efficiency, rather than relying on carbon credits. So I personally would rather see the money flow into the opportunities that can basically establish a data centre industry here in Australia that's long-term sustainable, rather than relying on carbon credits.
And you've mentioned water a couple of times. Can you tell us the issues around the use of water in data centres, what it's used for and how much of it is required?
Yeah, look, again, water's a massive sleeper issue. So if you think about a data centre, these are the factories, if you like, of the Ford car factories of yesterday. This is now really essentially what we've got. This is the new factories of tomorrow. And data centres are like humans. They like to be kept cool. They like to operate at a certain temperature. So the way basically data centres keep themselves cool is through water. And there's obviously, through that, there's a lot of evaporation of water through their processes. We're seeing some numbers coming out of the US, and the US has become particularly, there's a big focus on water because of the Californian drought a few years ago. And the big tech companies had a lot of focus on water in those who operated in California, which is a lot of them. And so we're seeing they've made some very positive commitments, which is great to see. The issue from an Australian perspective is we currently tip 97% of our recycled water in Melbourne and Sydney basically down the drain. We tip it into the oceans through different ways. And there's a massive opportunity here to actually use that recycled water by creating new investments and creating the pipelines to get those to these new facilities that can basically ensure that we're not creating a situation where investment in data centres is basically adding to our basically consumption of potable water. So there's some good alternatives we can do, and these are the conversations that we need to have. Challenge for Australia at the moment is that because we haven't had those extensive extreme heat days that we're certainly seeing in Europe and North America, the kind of water's fallen off the agenda, and it needs to come back, and data centres can be a big part of that solution.
Gordon Noble, great to get your insights. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.